So I'd like all of you to know October 2nd, which is the Thursday coming up, I think, yes. We will not have class on that day. That day will be for the Walker Business Connections. I know it's mostly in the afternoon, but I prefer to give my students the chance to prepare and get ready for that particular day. So there will be no class on Thursday. The business career services that are on the second floor here are the best that I've ever been through in my university experience. The people who do the job here is phenomenal. For those of you who are marketing students, Abby Brennan is the individual who takes care of marketing and supply chain. Abby was a student where you were 4 years ago. She was an intern, and I am the director of interns, did a phenomenal job. She was in this class like you. She got her master's degree. I've taught her 3 times. She's now getting her doctorate degree at UNC Charlotte, and she's teaching a principles of marketing class while she's still working at Business Career. So I urge you, if you have any questions about your career, go see Abby. She's awesome. Realize this is that too, the business career services, you've paid for this with your tuition. You've already spent your money on this. And so if you really want to maximize the dollars that you have in this university, go. You can't go wrong. They will help you with your resume. They'll do a headshot for you. They'll recommend what is acceptable. Go to meet people. They'll give you great tips on how to do this. And then at the business connections, there will be employers ready for individuals who are looking for jobs. Even the experience, even if you don't get an interview, is going to be valuable. And I consider it to be so valuable that I'm willing to give up a classroom time to give you the opportunity. So please, you've already spent your money. You might as well take advantage of it. There's no bad side to this. So once again, please do this. It's also you people in Hickory too. If you get an opportunity, come over, all right? Okay, so enough of the pitch. Okay, it's going to be a short session today. Contain your disappointment. Corporations like NVIDIA are really unique. NVIDIA started almost 25 years ago, making graphics processors, not wrapped around the whole setup of the CPU itself. So they produced a pretty funky, nice little video card. And then the world exploded when GPUs came out, and they had more processing speed and capability and RAM memory than the CPUs themselves did. That kind of launched NVIDIA now to where they are. They are one of the #1 corporations when it comes to AI, when it comes to the chips that run these huge LLMs to be able to produce this, to ultimately create generative AI. But to be able to start this up, they made the choice that instead of farming this out, they were going to invest billions of dollars in trying to get this to work. And here's where they are now. And I'm leaning constantly when I talk to you about the buy position is the starting position. But it doesn't mean that if you have something unique and special, that you shouldn't try to do it yourself. And there's good reasons why you should. So I'm going to talk about how do we pay for the buy. And then we're also going to come up with compelling reasons about why the buy is so good. And then I'm going to tell you a reason why you make. Okay? So what are the ways that we pay for the buy? Well, the 3 most common ways are margins, commissions, and royalties. So the margins are the most common way that we pay for the buy position or buying a market channels. And basically what that does is margin is the difference between the cost of goods sold and the selling price. That's the margin. That's the common way that you pay. So you pay your cost and you make money on the margin. In a commission is a percentage of the profit that is skimmed, and usually commissions are fixed at a certain percentage point. When we talk about franchising, which is to me one of the really great, unique things that America took as an idea and is really super refined, one of the franchising does, or what they do, is that they skim a percentage of every profit. So a McDonald's that sells $5 million in sales in a month, usually they're around 2.5. Anyway, 6 to 9% before they ever pay for one bill first goes to McDonald's corporate. And so that's what a commission is. A royalty, which is third, is a percentage of the business take, or the margins of the business. And so what that means is that I am going to sell 1/3, or you are guaranteed to have 1/3 of the total production that I'm going to ultimately produce. So what it means is if I'm going to produce $1 million of goods, your company's going to get 1/3 of all of that generated production. The other variations happen in two directions. One of them is when a corporation is brand new, and the other is when a corporation is struggling. These are kind of the, what's the word I want to use? The exotic ways that you can go about buying into the market. So the first is what's called a lump sum or a flat fee. And it's just basically exactly that. For perpetuity of that particular product, whatever it is, you will not have to pay any more. You find this a lot in software houses, especially ones that are just starting up, that need cash more, that need cash and they need work more than they need future considerations. So an example of this is I build apps. And there's a company called I Build App, which will allow you to build your own apps. And I did that for 2 or 3 companies. I Build App, when they first came out, this was, my God, 15 years ago. It's been that long. Anyway, when I Build App came out, they had a special, if you were a developer like I was, $1,500 flat. And you'd be able, they would give you support for the rest of your life. And it was great. And I spent my $1,500 and it was money well spent. There was a company in Czechoslovakia when I was in the ISP, and they built an email filter, or they were one of the first corporations that came up with filtering email for viruses and all the rest of it. They were a corporation that needed cash fast, and they gave me a $4,000 flat rate for life in the same way. And it was great, awesome. And then 6 months later, Microsoft bought it and put them out of business because they were taking up too much of their own. That's how things go. So that's flat. A functional discount is basically where the corporation will just pay for the functions that they perform, okay? So by that, what I mean is, if you just take care of my costs for shipping and transportation, pay my meals, take care of my people, if you just do those, the discount, the functional discount is just covering fees to do jobs. Now, the difficulty with functional discounts are Functional discounts, rapidly you get into bill padding. So, you're not only buying their dinner, you're buying their drinks afterwards. So functional discounts, paying for the functions that go on with whatever you do, can sometimes ramp up. The last is future consideration, which means I will provide you with those goods if in the future, in contract, which is vitally important, it's written in the contract, that if you achieve a certain level after 6 months to a year, that I become your permanent supplier. And so that's what future considerations are. The vast majority falls in this range, and the vast majority in this range falls into margins. It's pretty standard in the industry itself. Buying is much better, and buying is for several critical reasons. But I'm gonna first talk about, let's see, let me show you, let's see. Okay. So I'm gonna skip to this one first because I'm gonna stick on the buy option, and then I'm gonna give you the reasons why you go to the make option. So why? What are all of the major considerations why buy is so powerful? Why do I want a wholesaler that takes care of all my goods if I'm a mom and pop store? Well, there's lots of reasons why. First is motivation. The people I buy from have outstanding incentives and reasons for performing well. It is very easy to get out of contracts. It is very easy to substitute, especially if you're in the buy situation, because the buy situation says that there are outlets for my particular needs. And there's usually not one outlet, there are dozens of outlets. The corporations that I contract, profit is number one, and hopefully continued profits from my requests. And I want to enter in a long-term relationship, and the fear of loss of not providing good performance is a great check, especially in the world of competition. You love competition. Competition drives both sides to do as well as they possibly can, unless they're in a collusion, and that's different. Generally, the survival of the fittest drives companies to achieve the best that they can for you. In specialization, this is all they do. They have no distractions. And this is another difficulty, as I've said before, is if you're wanting to do the make decision, you're having to put yourself into performing in arenas that you yourself do not know. If I contract a shipping company to move my goods across the United States, that is what they do, and they only do that. Not only that, but corporations like that are bonded. Does anybody know what bonded means? Bonded means they are insured against disaster, all right? And so if anything happens to your particular equipment, you are insured against a loss. And so that's what bonding means. Failure will result if they fail to perform their functions better than their competition or at least equal. Because my mom and pop stores, their requests are minimal. If I have a supplier, they have the ability to pool demands from several manufacturers and from several suppliers. They sit at the boundary spanning with their specialized knowledge, understanding, and they're going to go about maximizing their markets as best they can as well. That one single manufacturer of those goods can call on many smaller customers more frequently. They are more attuned to the smaller customers, and they can satisfy demands. Just think about the millions of USB cables that are out there. There are not 400 manufacturers of USB cables. You're probably looking at about maybe a dozen at the most in the world, and everybody buys from someone else. And the answer is why? Why reinvent the wheel over and over again? Other than if you want to have a superior cable with high tension abilities, that have extreme breaking points, they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere. And so it's relatively easy to be able to replace them as well. And in that, you would want something where you have the highest percentage and the lowest dollar cost. And the last is that because you have more suppliers, you have independence from any single manufacturer. Now, one of the things that if you go out and brand your own product, a huge recommendation is don't have one manufacturer there to make your particular good. You want to have more. Anybody know where Nike has its factories? Well, that's a trick question. I asked it in my management in my graduate classes. Nike has no factories. Nike's sole function and purpose in life is shoes and athletic apparel. That's the only reason they're in existence. Well, if any of you go to graduate schools, one of the things that they'll talk about is you focus on your core competencies and everything else you let somebody else do. You'll hear that over and over again in graduate school. Why? Because they can do things better. And if it's not a strategic asset, then let somebody else do it for a lower price. Now, what's interesting about this university is where other universities are kind of subletting like their libraries out to Barnes and Noble or like their commissaries out to Cisco. What they're doing is everything's in-house, but that's also a strategic asset with this university. We buy local from local farmers, which is important. And the library is also an asset and a strategically important thing for the history of Appalachia. And so that's why we maintain our own. But if we didn't have those, it's always more efficient to have someone else do it, okay? All right, with all of these reasons, everything that we're going through, why? You make. There is only one reason, only one. And that is return on investment. There's only one reason to make. And actually, it's the only reason to buy, too, to be honest. I start from the buy point. I've got these strong reasons why. But if I make it myself, if it is unique and special, and I increase my return on investment, then it's worth it. And so, how do we define return on investment? There's a lot of ways you can do it in finance. There's like 3 dozen different ways that you can calculate it. For your test, which is really what you're wanting to care about, these are the 3 things that are important: revenues, direct costs, and overhead. Keep looking at Hickory, making sure nobody's rolling. Real good. All right. Revenues, direct costs, and overhead. So what do I define? Revenue is the average generated sales. That's revenue. Direct costs are all those costs associated with the direct production of the goods that you sell. It, in essence, is cost of goods sold. If you look at cost of goods sold, generally they're calculated as a per unit price. So if I generate $1 million of a given item, a cost of goods sold would be like $45 per unit. That's how you would express it. This way, of course, direct costs are all associated with the total cost, anything that is directly involved with the production of those units. So we talk about the employee salaries. We talk about the finished goods, the raw materials, the sub-assemblies, anything in the factory floor, the accumulated depreciation on the equipment in order to build those given items. All of that goes into what is considered a direct cost. It's exactly what it sounds like. Overhead. When you take accounting, if you haven't taken it yet, one of the things that you'll see when you're looking at your income statements is in expenses, there's something that's usually called general and administrative expenses. So overhead is all of those expenses that are not associated with production. These are the costs that you incur in just having a facility. The power bill can be split up between direct cost and general administrative. That would be split. But an example like leasing land. The leasing of the land would occur and be at a given cost regardless of whether I produce 0 items or 1 million. Legal expenses for incorporation. Those are expenses regardless of whether I produced a single unit or not. Those would be part of it as well. Salaries that are not directly associated with the production of those items. All of those are what would be considered overhead. And so what you would do is you would take your revenues, you would minus your direct costs. Once you have that, that's what's called net effectiveness. How effective were you in lowering costs and increasing revenue? Okay. It's real simple, folks. You either increase revenue or you lower costs. It's both sides. The difficulty, of course, is that when the target fascination is on lowering costs, that's all you're thinking about instead of trying to generate revenue. Okay. So you come up with net effectiveness over overhead, whatever that might be, and that ultimately is what's known as efficiency. How efficient are you at generating revenue associated with indirect costs? And if this number is higher, based upon your projections, when I do the make versus the buy, I make a choice. Now, the difficulty is that there are situations that might bar vertical integration regardless of return on investment. And one of them is quite simply, I don't have the intelligence, and by that what I mean is the knowledge to be able to move to that. I might not have the physical resources or the assets or the money. I can't take advantage of that situation. And if that's true, then I have to come here and try to come up with some variation that'll help me try to pay for it, okay? Or I might have a priority which might contribute more to return on investment and exhaust my capabilities. 2007, 2008, just as 2009 was when Apple came out with the iPad. 6 months before Apple was going to come out with the iPad, Microsoft had in their organization was coming up with what they called the Microsoft Courier. So if you look it up, you can actually see it online. It was like a folded piece of paper like this, okay? So the Courier opened up. It had a tablet between both sides and the stylus, and it had its own operating system that would do all of the things that, in essence, the iPad would do, but it did it, and they were going to come out with it 6 months before. Well, within Microsoft, it caused a turf war because they did not think it would contribute to the return on investment because they thought it would eat into the Microsoft, the Windows operating system revenues. So they canned it. Fast forward, Apple comes out with the iPad. The iPad fundamentally changes the platforms that we do computing on. So what happens is Microsoft goes from an over 90% operating system dominance on both desktops and laptops to where they're less than the third now, because we've changed the way we've done things. We're using smartphones and iPads now. And so the moral of the story is, if you're not trying to put yourself out of business, somebody else will. And this is what the iPad did. Apple did the make decision. They invested the billions of dollars. They reaped the success. So what are the capabilities in distribution that are bankable, and why we would want to make the make decision? What is it that NVIDIA saw that made them willing to buy or sell the farm in order to get the money to generate and basically, if they don't dominate AI, they dominate the conversation. They're not writing the AI software, but they're making the chips that can do it, which is astonishing. It's just amazing, okay? Well, there's two unique capabilities. One is intangible and the other is tangible. So, anybody ever see somebody tune a piano or a guitar by ear? It's really interesting to watch. I mean, the individuals with perfect pitch, I admire people who have that ability to just hear a note and knowing exactly what that note is. Well, that particular knowledge is easily transferable to musical instruments. Excuse me, but beyond that, its use is relatively limited. It in essence has like a $0 buyout factor if I were going to use that outside of that particular industry. And that's what idiosyncratic knowledge is. Idiosyncratic knowledge is a super special, highly unique capability that can't be redeployed into any other principle. And it's what NVIDIA was kind of banking on when they started to come up with their AI chips, you know, to develop these special processing kinds of chips. To have any other use, they're very highly specialized, is not deployable into other things. So in the world of chip technology, everything used to be hardwired. In the 50s and 60s, the actual software programs were built inside the chips themselves. When Intel came out with the 4004 processor, it basically became an erasable programmable memory that you could basically change by changing software. And this is where the advent of software came out at the same time. So what NVIDIA is doing is actually going back to the future by creating super specialized chips that have one single purpose, and that's in artificial intelligence. So do you understand how they do this, by the way? So like generative AI basically is where a computer software comes up with a unique idea that doesn't exist. So how do they do it? They create these giant long life modules that have enormous amounts of processing ability, and they actually make the chips learn, okay? They run these things. So like I'm in autonomous vehicles. It takes a year to program an autonomous vehicle, all right? That is an extremely specialized field, and that's where AI is right now. So this unique idiosyncratic knowledge based upon this one single function is solely for AI, but it has an unlimited future. So the next is relationships. Relationships are the connections that distributors have and the personnel and the manufacturer's customers. So Walmart and Procter & Gamble have a very special relationship. Our last chapter will talk a little bit more of that. Procter and Gamble actually has an office, part corporate in Bentonville, Arkansas. There's over 100 people that work there that are from Procter and Gamble. By the very same notion, I think it's Dayton, Ohio, is where 3G headquarters is. There is an office of Walmart inside P&G. They have a unique, specialized ability to be able to handle problems quickly and correctly. It is part of their social norms that they're going to come up with solutions to situations, even though they're difficult. And it's this unique, intangible relationship between the two that make them so successful. And the last is brand equity. And they mention private labels by supermarkets in North America. Anybody has gone to the Aldi's, the one in Hickory or the one in Wilkesboro yet? Those are really unique. It's a European model. IGA, Independent Grocers of America, use it as well. 85% of what they sell inside of an Aldi is their brand names. They're not, doing a lot of different unique stuff. But that manufacturer brand name is so unique that people drive from Boone to go to the Aldi's either in Hickory or the one in Wilkesboro. These are intangible capabilities that make the make decision that much easier. Then the next are tangible capabilities. And I would use Amazon and Federal Express's little issue they had about 4 or 5 years ago as an example. So Amazon wanted or even demanded 60% of the warehouse space that Federal Express was using in Cincinnati, Ohio, to be able to do their work, because basically that was where, Amazon said was the best place to do this. And Federal Express said 60% would be crazy. We do so much of the work on the Eastern Seaboard there. We can't give you that. But if they wanted to, and if they leaned hard enough, they might have been able to get it. Dedicated capacity is when the distribution has been created to serve a particular manufacturer. Northrop Grumman, 87% of the production of Northrop Grumman goes to the federal government. They serve just one particular manufacturer. And the other thing is that you have these customized, specialized facilities. That's one of the reasons that Cincinnati was also desired, because it had one of the most up-to-date, fast-moving systems when it came to moving goods as a centralized hub. And the last is being in a particular place. Let me see if I butcher this. Site specificity. Okay. That means that a certain specific location is more desirable, may not suit other manufacturers, but it's in the best location that it could be. So North Carolina, I'm not sure if you knew this, but 50 to 60 years ago, North Carolina was known as the furniture store of America, okay? So much of American furniture was made in North Carolina. My friends, outfitting their houses, it was actually cheaper to drive to North Carolina, have the goods shipped back to Mississippi, than it was to actually go in their own stores and ship. If you go down to Hickory, if you go down to Lenore, there are roads that were built solely for one reason, and that's to allow goods to be transported in a much easier fashion for Broyhill and the other manufacturers. Unfortunately, that day is over with, but we still do a lot of stuff. I actually know a couple of stores that still do shipping to Florida every summer because they have people who still enjoy it like that, okay? So there are intangible and there are tangible reasons why the make decision is valuable. But just to make sure we end on one thing, the major reason you do it is that your return on investment is higher. It's a reason you do everything in business, okay? All right. Let's go home. Let's go have a good weekend. Stay out of the rain. We'll come back on Tuesday. We'll finish this and then we'll move on to chapter funds, okay? Y'all have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.